Alright, this week we're going to go with Kelly Galloup's mini dungeon. This is take 2 on this one. I got the entire way through the fly. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at it, admiring the work of the head, the collar, everything on it was perfect. And sitting right next to the fly was rubber legs. Son of a bitch, I didn't time in. So we're taking another go at this one. I am dangerously low on this Sculpin Olive Grizzly Marabou, so if I mess this one up again, there may not be a video this week. We'll bypass, or you'll wind up having to watch me do a pheasant tail or something. Something simple. But back into the actual fly here, not my rant. Maybe I should take up drinking again. That stuff didn't happen. At least I would have an excuse for it. Back into the fly. The dungeon itself, full-size, mini, triple, whatever. If I could only fish one streamer for the rest of my life, it would be the dungeon. It's so versatile. It works great on a jig. It's awesome as a lateral or a lateral retrieve, jerk strip, whatever it may be. I love the whip the tail has in it, you know, and then the big bulky deer hair head gives that pause, allows the tail to whip around, and it just has so much of an S-swim to it. It's just a phenomenal pattern to fish. On the mini, this one in the spring has done so well for us over the last couple of years. It put one of my biggest fish in the net in this Sculpin Olive. The Sculpin Olive is the one that I like the best as far as colors go. You know, we'll do this in black with a purple tone, straight black. Maybe with some copper in it, white, natural, yellow, just straight olive, and then even a couple of like rust or orange, whatever, you know, kind of give it that crayfish-ish look to it. I don't even think that's a word, crayfish-ish. We're making stuff up as we go here. That's alright. Most everybody knows I'm not the brightest guy in the world anyhow. What the hell does it matter? Moving on to the actual fly here, I'm going to get zoomed in to where I kind of like this. It's a little bit off center right now. Once we get the back half connected to the front, it'll be a little more centered. This is an MFC. Let me see, I got the package here. This is 7050 MFC. This is a size 4. 4 is going to be our front hook. The back's a size 6. And we're going to go ahead and get a thread base in here. With this Sculpin Olive color, or just a straight olive, sometimes brown, whatever it may be, I almost always have a yellow. This is a sunburst yellow plume of marabou. I almost always cut this tail color-wise with some yellow. I just really like the way that it looks with the olives and browns. So we're gonna throw a little bit of yellow in here. Brown trout like yellow. We find a good plume here. We're gonna go ahead and peel this back. And we'll get this tied in. That's a pretty good piece, I guess. We'll measure this out just slightly longer than the overall length of this hook, and I got my cradle in the way. Go ahead and get 1, 2, and then work your way back to the ascent of the barb. And we'll start just adding a little bit of bulk to this body. We'll take that up to the front. Leave yourself about 1/8 of an inch up there. That way you can tie in your overwing and all that good stuff. Next up on this, I'm going to take just one strand of gold Flashaboo, and I'm going to double it up. And this is just going to be some internal flash. I'm going to leave this just shy of the overall length of this hook, or overall length of my tail, and then bring this around on the camera side as well, and give that a trim. Everything looks pretty clean right there. Like I said, I'm going to have to be really selective on this grizzly marabou because, well, I messed things up. So it's about par for course, quite honestly. That'll be a good overwing. This will be a decent tail. Won't be the best, but it'll work. When you do this, if you want to, you can go with the straight olive. I like this barred, and I can already tell I'm going to have to double up this tail. I like this grizzly marabou. It just gives a, you know, you look at the back of a Sculpin and it has that mottled, you know, olive brown, black. You know, there's nothing consistent on the back side of a Sculpin, and this really kind of imitates that nicely. So I like using this stuff, and I'm definitely going to need one more. That's a little bit, just a little bit sparse right there. I'm going to find a second just for profile purposes. I should have tied that one off to the side had I known I was going to be doing two. Oh, get back here. That'll fill that out nicely. So 1, 2, work our way back. Get a nice tight wrap in there, and I'm going to have a little bit of a bump, but everything will be alright. I'll live with it. I'm not crazy about that, but we're working with shoddy material, so bear with me on this one if it doesn't look the best. Alright, moving on, we're going to tie in some... I know I've got some brass in here somewhere. I really don't want to use this yellow. Or even gold would work. Extra small. That's not enough. Medium, too much. Medium. There's some small gold that'll do a little bit better than this yellow, I think. At least if nothing else, it's smaller. It should run into the dubbing a little bit better. So I'm going to take a piece of this, I don't know, probably about 6-8 inches long. We'll use this for the front and the back. The boys are out flying in the choppers again tonight. Alright, so we'll run this on my side, and I'm going to take this little section right here and I'm going to flip it over. Just hook that little bit of wire and then get that back to your tie-in point for the tail. And then let me see if I still have it out here. I didn't throw it away. Good. We're going to take just a little bit of this olive brown. Sounds like I'm going to land on the house. I'm going to form a quick dubbing loop here. And leave yourself a little bit of extra room when you do this dubbing loop. This is obviously going to be way more than what I'm going to need, but I like having that freedom to move things around where I want it and give myself that little bit of extra space. That way, you know, I'm not struggling to fit everything into a loop, you know, 1.5 inches long or whatever it may be. When you do this, before you throw this into your loop, kind of work on your taper a little bit. I got some deer hair in there. Work on your taper a little bit make sure that when you throw this in here that you're not working with more material than what you need, because on these minis, and when I say more material than what you need, I'm not talking about the overall length, I'm talking about the bulk of the material that's actually in this loop here. I'm most likely not going to use all of this, but that's fine, I can trim that off. I don't want so much material in there to where this body looks like a football and I have just dubbing flying everywhere. I want the body to still be sparse, but also still have a little bit of a taper. And it can get away from you really quick on this. So we'll just work that right to the front, leave myself just about that inch, or that 1/8 of an inch, and we'll tie this off. And push our scissors through that, call it good. Now I'm just going to peel this back slightly. I'm going to work over that dubbing. I got a little bump right there, that'll be just fine, but that tail just looks terrible. It's flipping off to the side. I'm not happy with it, but guess what? It's going to have to do. By the time it gets wet and in the water, you won't even be able to notice a difference. Oh, where am I at now? Hackle. Hackle. So, on these minis, a lot of the time what I use, especially when you start getting into the more one-off type colors, you know, like the orange or the yellows or whatever it may be, instead of buying an entire saddle or an entire neck, I go with these MFC. They're the barred saddle hackles. This one's olive and black, obviously, for the olive pattern. These things are phenomenal to use, and you'll see when I get tying these in how the overall size just fits perfect for these minis. So I tend to use these a lot. But I mean, if you have the olive, you know, neck or whatever it may be, feel free to use that. And I'm just going to pull these out to the side here and get a couple ready for when I tie in the front. That way I'm not sorting through it later. So as I'm speaking on these, kind of getting the two birds with one stone type thing. When you tie these, or when you're selecting these, I normally, for this video is really the only time where I'll tie one at a time, and that goes for just about any pattern that I tie. Normally it's a minimum half dozen. But you want these, I'll sort these beforehand, so this one, you know, these are two good backs right there. There will be one that has a little bit more bulk. This one's perfect. You can see this one has just a little bit more bulk. It's a little bit closer to like a Sculpin feather. So I'll sort these and set them off to the side. That'll be my front hook right there. So I'm just going to peel this stuff back. Make sure that your stem's still nice and flexible. And that's the great thing about these. I mean, it's still flexible all the way back here in this webby portion. So I mean, if you want to use that, you can. I'm going to go up into this section right here. I'm not going to put any of the webby stuff in this back hook. We may put a little bit in the front, we'll see. But we're going to go ahead and get this tied in. Everything's clean. And trim off this excess right there. Give a quick half hitch. Come on. Crowded my eye just a little bit there, but everything's fine. We're going to go ahead and take this, go 1, 2 wraps, and then just start working your way back. Nice even spacing all the way back to your tie-in point for the tail. And it's a little bit shy. I'm going to see if I can squeeze a little bit more out on this without loosening it. I want to get one more wrap in there. Boom. There we go. Cut that one a little bit closer than I needed to. Alright. So go ahead and in the opposite direction that you wound your saddle, take your wire and just rip it right through here all the way up to the front. Go around once, and I'm going to catch this with my thread. And we'll get that trimmed off, set it off to the side for our front hook. Now I got this little section right here that my hackle pliers were barely able to grab a hold of. We'll get that trimmed and out of our way, and there's the back section minus our overwing. On the full-size dungeons, when I'm typically using Sculpin, I won't do this just because the saddle is a little stiffer on the barbs than what the Sculpin is. It kind of lays back a little bit easier for you. I'll just kind of take and trim this top section, and it really doesn't matter for fishing these. It's not going to make a huge difference because once it gets wet, everything's going to lay back. It's just to highlight the fact that this stuff will lay for you a little bit cleaner, and it will look a little bit better on your vise if you go ahead and trim that back. And you can see, I mean, it's still going to want to stand up for us slightly, but like I said, as soon as it gets in the water and it gets wet, it's not going to make a difference. Just trimming that to show you that if you want to, you can go ahead and if you're tying these and you see that it's just sitting up too much for you, you can just take a quick trim on the top of that saddle and it'll clean it up. That's a little bit on the sparse side. I could throw in a second one here. I don't know if I will or not. I'm kind of measuring out what I have left, and I think the decision's going to be to stay on the sparse side. Oh, there's a decent one right there. There's a decent one. I'm going to lay this over. Normally I wouldn't be doubling these up at all. Normally, you know, you sort through this pack and find exactly what you want and just lay this down, and you can get away with doing just the one feather, but because I'm running so short on this, could have swore I had more of this too, but for the life of me I can't find it. Go figure. But I'm going to throw a second one on there, and it's just gonna highlight, you know, what we're after as far as the look goes. But you could have very easily gotten away with just the one had I not screwed the last one up. Those ones were just about perfect, but that's not the case. Screwed booch. Alright, so we'll get our whip finish in here, get this tied off, and the last thing I'm going to do before I switch over to the front hook is find my marker here, and I'm just going to touch this up with some tan just to cut down on the tone of this white. Everything looks pretty good. Alright, and as you can see, as this gets wet, the overall length of this, it's going to fold back into about the third point on your tail, and it's just going to be a nice seamless, it's just going to look like if you've ever looked at the back of a Sculpin, it's going to be that nice seamless color transition all the way back. I got a little bit of gold sticking out where I don't want it there. We'll get that squared away before the picture's taken. We'll leave it be as it is right now. Moving on to the front hook, we're going with a size 4 here. It says 7050 MFC size 4, and as always when I tie in my lead eyes and my wire, I'm going to switch over to a 140 here. If you want to, you can stay with the gel spun. That stuff's like gold to me, so I try not to use it on this stuff right here where I can get away with using a lesser thread. So I tend to do that. Saves a little bit of money. The gel spun's a little spendy. So okay, like I said, this is a size 4. On a normal size dungeon, our eyes would be sitting probably right about here. On the mini, we're going to move everything back, and you'll see why when we do the collar and the deer hair head. But we're going to move everything back just slightly, and these are 5/32 yellow dumbbell eyes. We're going to get those tied in, and we'll get these secure. Right now they're sitting on the top. Give them a quick flip to the bottom, and you can see where we have this space right here. Typically, like I said, the eyes would be sitting normally about where that black thread meets the bare hook, but we want these back just slightly, and that's because we're just going to do one spin of all of deer hair right in the front, and that's going to be good. We're not going to stack anything, it's just one quick spin of hair, trim it, and you're done. I started doing that on the mini Nancy P's too. You know, uses less material, speeds up your tying time, goes a lot quicker, and it looks just as clean, quite honestly. Let me make sure that that's good. Everything's sitting how I want, and everything looks good. Dropping beads all over the place. Just filled this back up. I'm not used to it being that full. Alright, so the next thing, I'm going to take my wire. I have about, I don't know, 100 pieces cut for, I was mass producing October's earlier, so I got a bunch of wire already pre-cut here. And we're just going to go ahead and get this wire fed through. Get it pretty close to even length. It doesn't matter, you're going to wind up cutting a little bit of it off anyhow. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we'll get this bead on here. Normally with these beads I try and go pretty small. There's some of these beads, you know, I mean, they're all different shapes and sizes when you buy them at the craft stores or whatever it is. So I try and get the beads that are on the smaller side. Some of them can be pretty long. Make sure that your wire is running parallel at this point. And we're going to take this all the way to the back, get this tied in. Give it about 2 or 3 loose wraps. Get your wire situated. Make sure that your loop is following the same path as, or the same loop as your back hook. And then we're just going to pull this tight. Get this. That looks pretty good. It's kind of tied off. The wire's kind of tied off to the side just slightly. I have found that, you know, if you're using the bead-along, when you cut this, you can see that little banana shape right there. If you keep that loop the way that it's sitting right there, when you feed this through the eye of the hook, if you keep that loop going this way, pull it tight and give it that kink, it has more of a tendency to follow the way you want to. If you go, you know, pulling it this way and then fighting it, and it just seems like that wire wants to twist on you. I don't know, it could be me, something that I'm doing, but I keep that loop going this way, and that's just a coil that it has from being in the, you know, in the spool when you get it at the store. It just keeps that memory. So I tend to just try and work with it, and that way it doesn't fight me as much when I'm tying this in. I'm going to stop this wire just shy of my eyes, and we're going to bring this around, double it over, and I'm going to take it about halfway back the hook, halfway back the body I should say, and I'm just going to tie this in, and I'm going to trim these off. These are, like I said, I was cutting these for full-size Octobers, so a little bit long for the mini dungeon application, but it works. Oh, got my eyes spinning. And then go ahead and just cover everything up there. And then we'll whip finish and switch over to gel spun. I'll throw a little bit more glue on that. I bumped it with my finger and it moved a little. I mustn't have got as much in there as I thought. A little bit more glue in that before I run the gel spun. Alright, so switching back over to the 100. Get that tied in, and I got 1, 2, make sure I get good contact with my glue and everything. And now with this GSP, I mean, you can really wrench on these eyes. Make sure you get some glue in there, you know, good contact with the thread, with the eyes, and those eyes are going to be locked in place for you. You're not going to have any issues with them moving. Now, the one thing that I'm going to do a little bit different on this one that I normally don't do, and that's because I jacked up the last one and I got very sparse material left to work with, is I'm going to take and make a full skirt on this. Normally I don't, but I want a good cover. So I'm going to do a full skirt. Typically I'll just do the one grizzly marabou piece over the top, but because I want this covered well and I'm running low on quality feathers, I'm going to give this a little bit extra. That way my cover looks alright. And let me find another piece here. Oh, I don't like that one. Maybe I got some junk on this pile. Nope, nope. Bear with me here as I search through this, try and find a good cover piece. This one will have to work. Go ahead and wet that down so it cooperates a little bit more. And I just want this going right past my tie-in point, or right past my connection point on that eye of the front hook. And that's really all the further I want that going. I can tell this is bulkier than what I like it anyhow, typically, but like I said, running low on material, so we'll make do with what we have. But normally all it is just the one feather right over the top that runs into that overwing, and then that's all I'll use, but we're going to make an exception here. Plus it's on camera, I can't have it looking terrible on camera. Okay, now this one's going to be a little bit longer, and it's going to run probably a third of the way back the overwing, and all that serves is it just makes a nice clean transition all the way back this fly. You'll see it when I turn it this way, and that one's got a little twist to it, but it'll be alright. When I turn it like this, and you can see when that thing gets wet, it's just going to slick back, and it's going to be a nice seamless transition all the way back to that tail. Like I said, there's a little bit of curve in that one, but I'm going to live with it. As soon as it gets wet, it's not going to matter anyhow. It's going to be fine. And then I'm going to take this gold wire. We'll get this tied in. Bring this back to the tie-in point for the skirt. Call that good, and we're going to go ahead and half hitch, and I need to get this out of my way. It's going to drive me nuts. There we go. Form your dubbing loop. Advance up to the front, and then we're going to half hitch this and get our dubbing in there. So now I'm going to take some more of this olive brown ice dub. Just going to start building my taper on the outside of the loop before I put this in. Get in there and manipulate this how I want it. That looks pretty good. Give this a quick spin. Stay on the sparse side on this material. If you want to, and you want to build a little bit more bulk on this front section than you did on the back, just keep your dubbing loop looser than the, keep a couple less spins on it, and you'll get that little extra bulk that you want if you feel that you need it. Good. Anchor that down, and we're just going to work our way right next to the eyes. I'm going to leave a little bit of space there. I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but you should be able to see that little bit of white between the dubbing and the eyes. And that's all the more that I'm going to leave right there. I don't want a huge gap in between the two. I want things staying right where they are. I want just a very minimal gap right there. That's less than I'm going to have to fill up when I go putting the collar and everything else on there. I'll speak to that a little bit more as I advance, but right now the next step on this one is I'm going to find this more slopping looking feather for the hackle, and I'm going to leave a little bit of that webby stuff in there. Get that tied in. Where'd that stem go? We'll just trim that stem off real quick, half hitch. And then we'll work this to the front or to the back. Get one, maybe 1.5 turns of that nice webby material right there in the front. Get over here. Take that all the way to the back. Nice even wraps as always. Capture it with your wire. Getting a little short on this. And then we'll take that wire right to the back. Or right to the front. Go ahead and tie it off. Get rid of the wire, get rid of the excess saddle. That almost has like a yellow tint to it. Kind of like it actually. Kind of sets it off from the rest of the pattern some. We didn't get too awful much trapped in there. It's pretty clean. Once again, if you want, you can just go straight back with this. Kind of get rid of some of that junk if you want. I'm not going to forget the rubber legs this time. I'm going to actually tie this one in. And the funny thing was, is it's just one rubber leg. That's it. One rubber leg. I ruined that fly. Alright, so this is the gold, amber, and black fly enhancer. I love using this on these olive patterns. For some reason, I just really like the way that it looks. We're going to take the 1, 2 on the figure 8. I'm going to come right in front of this, go 1, 2, pull tight. And those legs are locked into place. Everything's how I want it. I'm actually trapped a little bit there. Trapped a little bit of material. So if you want, you can go ahead and trim these right now. Typically, I'll do it with this leg so you guys can see it. Typically, I like them going about back to where the tail is. You know, if you want to go a little bit further back, you can. Whatever, if you want it shorter. Oh. It's a good sign that my scissors are about done. I'm struggling to cut rubber legs. So you can see as we pull this back, it's going to be, you know, just about to our tail. I mean, if you can see past my fat thumb that was in the picture there. We're going to do another overwing on this front section. Now, with this front, even if I have, I mean, it's very rare when you go through these packs, you may get 4 or 5 perfect feathers throughout the entire thing. Even if I do get the near perfect feather, I'm still going to 9 times out of 10 double this up. So I find my less than perfect or less than ideal feather, and I'll throw that one in first. It'll just kind of sit there for me. It'll kind of cut the overall tone down. And then I find my second best or my preferred feather for this overwing. And it's really tough to find a preferred feather at the end of this pack here, but this one I think is going to have to do it. Yeah, maybe I like that one a little better. I don't know. So I'm just going to measure that out. It's going to be sitting a little bit longer than the first one that I tied in, or the same length. There we go. There you can see, I mean, it just adds a little bit of extra bulk to that overwing. And then once again, when this folds back, it's going to be going just slightly over my tie-in point for the skirt. And when this thing gets wet, it's just going to be one seamless transition the entire way back. Where did I put my straw at? There we go. We're going to get this material out of the way. I'm just going to throw a straw in here. Get that material out of the way so we're able to work unimpeded and we don't cut off a rubber leg. So before I move on to the collar on this one, I'm just going to tie a quick, I'm just going to finger dub some ice dubbing on here. And I'm just going to make 1 or 2 wraps just to cover up some of this white. You can see it covers that up really nice, and it gets rid of some of the white, and it also fills in a little bit of the gap that you have from tying over material, so that gap kind of gets eliminated slightly. Makes another nice transition. So back to, or onto the deer hair portion of this, and then this is going to finish off this pattern. As long as I didn't forget anything else this time, I think I should be good though. Now on a full size, or you know, the triple dungeons, you're going to wind up using a lot more deer hair, and this is still going to look like a lot. I haven't cleaned this out just yet, but this is still going to look like a lot of deer hair for, and this is strictly the collar. But we're going to clean this out. I know you can't see this, I'm out of the frame right now. We're going to clean this out, and this is what we're left with. I have it fanned out so it looks like a lot more than what it is. But if I were tying the full-size dungeon or the triple, I would have deer hair falling out of my hand right now. I'd pick so much of it out because I like that nice, thick, bulky collar. This one's not a full-size, obviously. We're tying the mini, so you can get away with a little bit less, but don't sell yourself short. Don't have a wimpy collar on this. Alright. Got our collar stacked. Everything's pretty clean here. I got a couple that are probably a little bit short, but for the most part everything looks good. Now I'm going to measure this out, and I want these tips to be between the point of my hook and the barb. That's my measuring point. That's where you get the consistency when you're tying these in. So I'm just going to hold these out, transfer hands, and I'm going to cut this square. Everything's nice and clean. Spin your thread. And we'll go 1. Just get to where your thread's starting to disappear in that deer hair. 2, you can go a little bit tighter. And then your third one, you can wrench down. Don't go wrenching too hard on this one, because you still want to spread the collar out and give that nice half moon. There you can see from the underneath side, we have nothing on the underneath. Everything, you get that nice pectoral fin look. And then if you want to, just go 1, 2, working through that. Our collar's nice and secure, it's not going anywhere. Next up on this, like I said, these eyes are a little bit further back, and it's really important when you do this. I found this out when I was tying the Nancy P's. Make sure that this bump of hair from your collar isn't going past your lead eyes, so it's not on the eye side or the eye side of the lead eyes, eye side of the hook of the lead eyes. Make sure that this is sticking back here, and you want this to kind of just be like a nice little slope effect. If you have a big bump right there, when you trim this top portion, you're going to wind up with a gap. This way, when you spin this hair here, everything's going to transition into this collar, and it's unimpeded by this little bump that's right here, this little ball of excess deer hair that inevitably winds up in there from when you tie in the collar. So, moving on to the actual head of this, I'm taking probably just a little bit more, and I'll hold this up for reference. I don't have a good reference as far as, you know, like a popsicle stick, or probably 2.5 popsicle sticks for width, I guess. I don't know, I'll hold it up to the fly or hold it up next to, you know, there's a spool of thread, so it can kind of give you a reference of how much I'm working with. And then I'm going to clean this up, run it through the comb a few times, get all of this junk out of here. This is really good quality deer hair. I mean, that's all the more. I pulled on that 4 or 5 times. That's all the more I got out of it, so we're in good shape. Now I'm going to get rid of any of this shorter stuff that may be in there. I'm going to re-grab this deer hair, and I'm just going to trim all these tips off nice and clean. I'm going to transfer back over, make sure that everything's still pretty clean. Now I want my thread in the center of the eye and these lead eyes. I'm going to transfer this over to my right hand, grab it back with my left, and I want the center point of this hair to be my tie-in point. I mean, it doesn't have to be directly in the center, but don't go short in one end and, you know, having one side longer than the other. It'll make it tough to get a nice clean head. So we'll get the 1, 2.5 wraps. Really start working your thread through there, and then I'm going to take my hand off of the portion that I'm tying in, and I'm going to get one good spin around there. You can see it's still wanting to rotate on me, still wanting to rotate for some reason. There we go. For some reason it just wanted to keep spinning. I must have had a loose wrap or something in there, but we got it squared away now. I'm just going to give 1 or 2 more in there to make sure that everything stays clean. Now I'm going to peel this back, and you can see I still have a nice section to work with right in front of here. I'm still able to get behind this eye and get a nice couple of wraps in there before I whip finish. My eye's still nice and clean. We'll get the 3 on there. I'm going to do one more set. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything's pretty good. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do before I trim this is I'm just going to take my comb and run this through here. Just kind of stand all my thread out to this, or all my hairs out to a 90 degree on this as much as possible. And then I'm going to find my razor blade somewhere in this jungle of material I have on my bench. And I'm going to flip this over. This is where it's important to have something in here, whether it be a straw or a hair clip or whatever, just to keep these rubber legs out of there. If you forget to tie them in, you don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going to brace my hand right here. I got it leaning on the vise, and I'm going to brace my right hand with my left, and I'm going to find my eyes. I'm going to go slightly above my eyes, and I'm just going to draw this razor blade nice and flat on the bottom. Nice and flat. Get that stuff out of the way, and there you'll be able to see on this underside. I gotta make one more pass through here. I'm not too crazy about that one. It was uneven. There we go, that's a little bit better. But now you can see on this underside, our eyes are unimpeded, and you have this where we threw that little bit of dubbing in before we did that collar. You can see it. If anything, there's one or two wraps of white thread. If you really want to, and you really want to get picky, you can go ahead and just touch this with some tan and tone that down a little bit. But really, I mean, it was like 2 or 3 wraps, so it wouldn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Next up, we're going to make this little half moon with the thread. Find your eye, make sure that you are nice and centered, and then we're just going to push right through this back to our collar. Get that first cut, that just gives you the overall shape that you're after. Don't worry about it being perfect at first. And you can see on this one, I'll zoom in here in a second to give you a little bit better idea what we're looking for on this collar, or on this head. But before I do that, I'm just going to trim some of this stuff that's bleeding into my collar. And if you've watched a lot of the deer hair videos that I've done in the past, I've shown you where, you know, just kind of get your collar out of the way, and then you can take your razor blade and just run it right into your thumbnail, and you're not going to worry about cutting yourself, and it gives you that nice clean break between your collar and your head. So like I said, I'm going to zoom in on this one just to highlight this a little bit. You can see on this head right here, this is still pliable. There's still a lot of air gaps where water's going to be able to get into. Some of the patterns that you'll see out there, these heads are so compact, it's almost like a dang cork going through the water. And that's really against the way that, you know, Kelly designed it. When he did this, he didn't want these to be really compact. He wanted them to be able to shed water on the back cast and accept water when they're in it. And keeping this nice and loose, and not having so much damn hair in there to where it just looks like a D&D or something like that, it allows it to swim how it was designed in the water. Give this a quick turn. Here you can see that everything's still pretty even. Before I take the straw off of this one and do the final trim, I'm going to take this out of the vise, and I'm just going to give this the overall sculpin head shape that I'm after. Don't get real aggressive on this. I mean, you can see, we're not working with a big head on this, and it is very easy to get out of control, and before too long you're going to wind up having nothing left for a head. Not that I've done that, but I've heard that it can happen. Alright, I hope I was in the frame there. I didn't even check that. I probably was. Yeah, I'm guessing that I was in the frame. Hope so. Should have checked my monitor. Anyhow, we're going to go back in the vise here, and I'm going to zoom out just slightly, that way I know I'm not screwing anything else up. And then I'm just going to come around these eyes here. You can see, not so much on this one, that one's pretty clean. This one right here, it's a little bit obstructed, so I just want to trim around these eyes slightly. That way I'm able to see it, and the fish, more importantly, is able to see it, because those eyes can, I think, be a trigger point. Get some of these hairs out of there, they're too long. And I'll probably make one more pass through this after I shut the camera off, just to kind of clean it up before I take the picture. But if this were one that, you know, we're just going straight to the water and wasn't going to get its picture taken, it would have been done a long time ago, and I wouldn't be worrying about all these details, because the second that it gets into the water, it's a completely different looking fly anyhow. But, we'll pop off this straw here and give one final look at the finished product. There we go. There. That's what it's supposed to look like with the legs. There you can see on the collar on this one we have that nice half-moon effect, and this underneath side is still unimpeded. You can still see all the hackle, you can still see the dubbing we threw in there. Everything's nice and clean. You don't want this collar rotating around on you and having hair underneath. It just it'll affect the swim of the fly, and it'll also you know, I saw something that I didn't like there, but it'll also, I mean, it'll cover up your body, it'll come up some of the reflective portions of the ice dub that we want to be coming through. But there you have it. There is Kelly Galloup's mini dungeon. This was the long-winded version of it. If you think this one was bad, you should have seen the first one that I did that I messed up on. The light's in the way. The one that I messed up on, it was probably 1.5 times as long, but I was able to cut it down a little bit, so I guess the mistake paid off. But there you have it. Like I said, that's Kelly's mini dungeon. Any questions or comments on this one, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. But thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next fly.